a slightly stranger episode for today. Here in Wales, we have a rich history, from the Druids and the Celts that populated these beautiful lands, to the legend of King Arthur and Merlin, from tales of Dewi the dragon, to the invasion by England and the attempted eradication of our language and culture. But one area of history that I am both immensely proud of and equally saddened by is that of our minds. Like many Welsh families, mining has a deep connection within my family. On my mother's side, my great-grandfather, who was an incredibly talented painter and who'd won a scholarship to the Royal College of London, had to abandon his studies when his father died and return to work in a colliery to subsidise the family. Then we get to my father's side. How would I describe them? Vast. My grandfather was one of 13. His father was one of 22. 2 world wars didn't slow them down, I can tell you. A lot of the men worked down in the mines for most of their life. Side note, stay to the end to see something more scary than any ghost or ghoul. Now originally I was going to do a video on the ghosts of the mines, based on the stories from actual miners. However, when speaking to the actual miners from Big Pit, there were many reluctant to speak to me about the things that they had seen or heard. Not because they hadn't seen or heard them, but the main reason is because they have all had relatives who have perished during mining disasters. So out of respect for those individuals, I am not going to look at the ghosts, but I am going to look at some of the disasters that have occurred, the horrific conditions that the staff worked in, and a belief held in Wales and Cornwall of a strange creature that inhabits the mines. Mining has occurred in Wales ever since the Roman conquest of Britain. Copper, lead, zinc, silver and gold were all mined in small amounts and usually by enslaved natives. But large-scale mining expanded in Wales in the 18th century when coal became the #1 mineral required for blast furnaces. This continued through the 1800s and the Victorian Industrial Revolution. It powered the factories to build war machines of the Great War and eventually came to an end in the 1980s with a destructive consequence to the surrounding areas and community. So what were the conditions like in the mines? Long and short, hell. Nothing short of hell. Black coal dust coating the lining of miners' lungs. The fear of mine collapse and being buried alive. The constant threat of explosions, and if the initial raging ball of fire didn't kill you, then the following poisonous, odorless gas would. The threat of injury or death from mining equipment. And all in the pitch black for 12 to 14 hours, 6 days a week. Entire families worked in the mine just to earn a livable wage. Dependent on the age, children were used to guide the horses dragging out coal from the mines back to the surface. But if they were younger, they had a much more terrifying job. They were usually placed in darkened chambers with thick doors on either side to reduce the airflow. Their job, to open the doors for carts coming and going. Sometimes, they'd be in this space for hours on end with no one to keep them company, except the silence around them, and occasional creak of the timber frames. The only light, a small candle in a pitch-black room. If that candle should go out, they would have to sit there and bear the silence. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't think of anything more claustrophobic. Throughout the early coal mining period and all the way to the mid-20th century, the focus was on profit and not safety. Like so many other large-scale industries, something was bound to happen. Pit disasters and explosions were a constant risk. The largest pit explosion in not just Wales but the United Kingdom was that of the Sengennydd colliery disaster that saw the deaths of 439 miners on the 14th of October 1913. Several of my relatives were caught up in this disaster and lost their lives. But another tragic case was on the horizon. Almost 53 years to the day of the Sengennydd explosion, one of the most horrific mining disasters in the history of Britain occurred. Many of us have heard of the Aberfan disaster from the hit Netflix show The Crown, but for those who haven't, I'll give a brief account. Late in the summer period and stretching into the autumn, residents of the small mining town of Aberfan became increasingly concerned with what looked like a massive coal waste around the pit. Letters from the local council had been sent out to the National Coal Board with testimony from engineers complaining that it was dangerous. Especially with the weather due to take a turn for the worse, this was met with the response, "Make a fuss and the mine will close." Many of the villagers were miners and required the mine to support their families, and so the issue was ignored. In October that year, the weather had taken a turn for the worse. A damp fog had descended, and then the worst happened. At 9:15 a.m. on the 21st of October 1966, a wall of 300,000 cubic yards of coal waste began to slide down the mountain. Onlookers could only watch in absolute horror as a small slide picked up speed and grew into an avalanche of coal slurry and smashed into the Pantglas Junior School. In total, 144 people lost their lives in that disaster. 116 of them were children. Miners and volunteers from the surrounding areas downed their tools and travelled to the site to begin the horrific task of digging out the bodies from the rubble. My grandfather struggled all his life with dust picked up from the mine. It attached itself to the lining of his lungs, and I always remember him being stuck on a nebulizer. On this day, he was off from work with a raging chest infection, and as a result was exempt from helping, a turn of events that he was always grateful for. Digging the bodies of crushed children out of rubble is something that no one should have to encounter. Now let's get on to a slightly lighter subject, the cryptids. The Welsh and the Cornish have a great many similarities. From similarities in dialect to the fact that you can probably find us pissed in a field at various points in the year for one excuse or another. Let's be honest, we're all British and we don't generally need an excuse to get plastered. But one interesting similarity is to do with mining. In Cornwall, there is the belief that small entities inhabit the mines. They were said to be small, gnome-like creatures called knockermen or knockers, who would guide miners to rich deposits of minerals and forewarn them of dangers. It was said that the sound of intermittent knocking ahead of your pickaxe was the knockerman letting you know that you were heading in the right way. In Wales, we had our own version of the knockerman, known as the Coblin Eye. If angered, however, they would throw stones in an attempt to bring the mine down and stop the mining continuing. Now, I did promise that I'd share something more terrifying than any ghost, demon or cryptid. When trying to find the identities of my relatives caught up in the Sengenid mining disaster, I came across my great-great-grandmother. All I'll say is that she could have heard a mining disaster in New Zealand. But I also can't help thinking that I've seen her before somewhere. But that's all from us here at Dark Entertainment. We hope that you've enjoyed the episode. If so, please comment, like, and just press that thumbs up button. The thumbs up really helps the algorithm and will help me building the channel. If you have any stories that you wish me to tell or know of any places I should visit, drop me an email at dark_entertainment@outlook.com. And remember, stay dark, stay creepy, and always laugh. Ta-ta!